few nods. Well, welcome to a website named Desire. How many of you actually got the poster so far? Just no? Okay, I'll show it to you, and you're going to want it. I actually have a few here, and it may just turn out that people will just grab the poster and leave. Hopefully, that's not the case. This is going to be a very, very honest session, right from the setup part where you actually saw me trying to pull my files together. The poster, which I'll get into, which is what sort of evokes the emotion and gets people talking about stuff, is just about the web design process. And I actually like telling the story about how we actually built a poster. For those of you, it's great. You actually haven't seen the poster. I'll go through that. But having said that, this talk is not about the web design process as we have read about it and we know about it in books, right? We do some envisioning, we build some wireframes, we go build some comps, a bunch of people shout at us, and then we finally put the logo where they want us to, right? It's not about that. I actually want to talk about the real side of web design. It's a very complicated profession, in my opinion, and there's a lot of juggling that goes on. So I want to talk about the people, the processes, the soft things, the real soft things that make such a huge difference in going from concept all the way to launching a site. But I'm actually digressing right now. I'm actually going to change things around because you guys haven't seen the poster, so I'm going to show you the poster first. So we built this. We designed this poster a few months ago, and I'll tell you the story about it. But the whole point was, I was in a meeting with the Expression Web guys. You guys saw the super preview keynote in the keynote yesterday, right? Okay, so it's those guys who actually built that product, and I spend a lot of time with them because this is just one of my passions. I like web design and web development and standards-based development. And a guy by the name of Eric Saltwell, and I know he's there, and he's going to get totally embarrassed by this, but I want you to raise your hand. Hey, everybody. Clearly, Eric is not embarrassed. He put up this insane flowchart in one of our strategy meetings, okay? And it was called a hierarchy of people who make websites. People who make websites, of course, was stolen from Alistapart, if any of you read Alistapart. Very gracefully stolen, though. And I thought it was amazing because what he did was he started right at the top. Right out here. He started with a person, and then he broke a person down into all the kinds of roles that are involved in developing a website, right? And he also talked about how those people are involved in developing websites. My favorite actor in this was definitely Schlepp, someone we don't care about. But it was just an amazing visualization for me to see. I mean, it's not the prettiest thing. No offense, you're not the best designer, I know. But in terms of communicating and getting a conversation started about who the heck are we servicing when we build tools for web developers, I think it did a fantastic job. And one of the struggles we have internally as Microsoft, and this is something that I work on a lot as an evangelist, is how do we communicate to a new audience, right? And all of us sort of grew up on Adobe. I mean, I've had my Adobe chip firmly implanted in me. I used to write books about Flash. We're in a very new market, talking to a very new set of people. And it's very tough as Microsoft to communicate both internally and externally that we are getting it, that we get it, right? So I looked at this, and the first thing that struck me as an evangelist was, we've got to do something with this. How do we actually get the word out that we actually do great customer research? And sort of one thing led to another, and that's how I actually met Eric, and I went up to him and I said, hey, let's do something with this poster. And of course, I'm sure at that point he looked at me and was like, yeah, what a flake. And he walked off, right? And I went off for 2 months, and the way this works, I mean, I'm giving you a behind-the-scenes look at Microsoft. The way it works at Microsoft is I'm just a schlep, so I need to go find money and budget to actually make this happen. So I started asking around, and a guy who now I report to, Thomas Lewis, actually said, hey, I have a little bit of money. And he told me how much he had, and I knew it wasn't enough. I said, I'll take it. And I did. I think I'm ethnically challenged not to. I guess I'm not supposed to make those kind of jokes, but it's on camera. So we took the money, and I went back to Eric, and I think he was really surprised to see me come back because, internally we make a lot of promises to each other, and that's just the corporate environment. And I came back and I was like, hey, so I got this money. Let's do something with it. So we started thinking about what we could do. And around the same time, I heard about this company called Xplane, xplane.com, I think Xplane. They just make tremendous visualizations. How many of you are into pixel art, isometric pixel art, like eBoy kind of stuff, right? You probably have seen the... What did you say?
I went like this, and then you said eBoy. I'm like, oh no.
No, not eBoy?
No, I like him, but I'm not into it.
Okay. Leave. I know.
Myself, but I love watching it.
Yeah, I do too. I'm not just yanking your chain. So we had this sort of brainstorm. We're like, hey, this is really cool. You've seen some of the Web 2.0 posters that eBoy has done. And we found this company that does really similar work in Portland. So we really had no budget. And because the way the company works, when we called them up and we said, hey, we really like the stuff you guys do, we have this idea, we want to turn it into a poster, a visualization. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, well we'll charge $10,000 to come to Microsoft. I was like, yeah, we can't do that. So they sort of worked it out, and we drove there. We had a nice big design session with them, and over a span of 2.5 to 3 months, we came out with the poster that I just showed you guys. So the whole point here was we wanted to communicate two things, right? That web design clearly is this has got this really Where's Waldo feel. But web design is a very complicated, convoluted process. And when I see people trying to describe it, they try and structure it in a very linear fashion, right? Like I talked about. Here's when we do wireframes. Once we're signed off on wireframes, we go to comms. Once we're signed off on comms, we go to write HTML and CSS. And really, in reality, sure, you can bucket it that way. But my contention is it's not that simple. So we wanted to communicate that, but we also wanted to show people how much goes into it, how many people are involved. Jeffrey Zellman does this keynote about respect, right? That web designers lack. We don't get respect. It's just seen as this thing that people do as they're sitting behind a reception desk or something and they're updating a website. But it's far from the truth because the OS today, the medium today, the most prominent and dominant medium today is the web. So it's just counterintuitive that we actually don't have respect in that environment. So he has a really great talk about that. You can actually YouTube it and you can watch it. So we got those two things in there. We're like, okay, we have the roles and we have the scene. And I thought I'd walk through the scene. You can actually go to a website named desire.com where we actually add a little more context on what the poster is about. So we had this thing where the process kicks off here, right? And that arrow is like a subliminal message. Go look there, which I don't think anyone got. And if you follow this one character who's the project manager who has a rain cloud above her head, because that's how most project managers are if you ever worked with one, she has a little progress bar and she leads you through the process, right? So you just follow her all the way. And you see her here in the design and development pen, and she finally works her way down. And this is a very literal metaphor. Last leg of the project when you're launching is really tough, so she's scaling the building, finally gets to the launch pad, and they launch the website. The other thing we did sort of was we wanted to appeal to all these different characters that we portray in all these roles in the poster, right? So here, for instance, you have, can you guess who this guy is? The front-end web developer, right? The guy who writes HTML and CSS. Of course, he has a shrine to Jeffrey Zellman, and there's a little CSS Zen garden, which is a little play on Dave Shea's thing. That was actually Eric's, man, we worked really hard on that one. I wanted to ship it, and he kept coming back, no, we got to add the Zen garden. No. So the process is pretty simple, and you guys know this, especially, how many of you are web designers or you build websites for a living? A good many of you. We've all done this, right? There's some project kickoff meeting, which you see here. And then we all sort of get together, different roles get together, and you come up with a concept. If you're in an agency, you're going to pitch it to a client, right? But that's the phase where you get together and you come up with an art board, which you see, the art director here has an art board. There's a lot of tension between the dev manager and the creative director, which is commonplace in these environments. They're throwing daggers at each other. And then you finally get out here, and the creative directors presenting the concept that they came up with, right, to the clients. And clients go, okay, great, let's do the project. And you see the project manager go off and say, go, 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 everybody, we're actually going to develop this website. And this is where all the real work is done, right? And this is that amorphous place where the magic so happens. And I want to spend time there because that's where things get a little tricky. And at some point, this is, again, another little well, there's Bart Simpson. But this was how many of you have actually been in a war room meeting or a war team meeting, right, when you're trying to get to launch? Okay, one. Typically, when you're working in agents, not an agency, but a corporation or something larger than an agency, you do all the wrong things up front, right? You don't spend enough time on design up front, and then the way you solve it is you get everyone together twice a day and then make them fight with each other. And whoever is the loudest and the strongest gets to figure out what the product is when it's launched. So this was a very literal play on the war team meeting. And then, at some point, the design development is done, and you see people climbing up, and the website launches. So, like I said earlier, my contention is that this is not wrong, right? This is sort of the flow that people follow. But it sucks for a lot of us because there are these preconceived notions that have been introduced into the environment because people have read books about how a website is built, books that have some project plan, and then there'll be an example of a wireframe. And don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing those things. It's just when you hand that to a set of people who are expecting a website, a set of stakeholders, and they've read that kind of material, they go, okay, so next week you're going to have the comps. And in your mind, you're like, holy crap, no. Like, I don't even know what I'm going to build. Oh, okay, in 2 days you're going to have your wireframes. Yeah, you nod, but you're like freaking out, right? And it's because of the expectations that are set in the literature that we read today. It's no surprise that web design is not a profession. You can't go somewhere and get a degree in web design. There is good news. There's curriculum being developed in several colleges and stuff, but it's just pretty amorphous. It's a few of us who are somewhere between coding and somewhere between design. Somewhere we like print design. We're attracted to aesthetics too. It's this really amorphous thing, and we decided, I want to build websites. It really gets me ticking. So let me debunk some myths, and I might save you 50 minutes of your time. This session is not about tools or software. And there was a gentleman who actually came up and asked me, hey, what are you going to talk about Silverlight? Hell no. A lot of other sessions that do that. I'm just kidding. My team has done several Silverlight projects, but this session is not about that. I want to talk about the people, about what happens behind the scenes, the softer stuff, right? Because that's the stuff you're not going to read anywhere. I don't want to talk about the theory. You can go find that in a book, right? I want to talk about practice. It's not about development, so I'm actually going to stop this presentation right when we get to the development part of it. I'm going to do everything before that, how we came up with an idea, how we executed on it, what kind of challenges we met, and then we finally developed it, but I'll stop there. So yeah, it's about soft skills. It's not about hard skills. So sometimes it comes across as fluffy, but I think this is the important stuff, right, that only someone who's been through it can tell you. These are the kind of things I wanted when I was in school. So I'm giving a session that I think I would like. I'm not even trying to be conceited, but I will not be offended if you want to walk out the door, because it's about the real stuff. So let's get started. So there are 3 things that I think are just tremendously important, and no one ever talks about these things when you're building not just a website, but software, when you're designing software. And the first one is trust. And it's about gaining trust, right? People are scared of designers because, well, the reputation we have is, oh my God, here he comes. He wants to paint some pretty pictures. He's going to ask for some crazy things. Don't get offended by that. Just, go with the flow. Your opportunity there is to change people's minds, to break the stereotype, right? So what I'm going to use in this presentation is a case study, MIX09. How many of you have actually been to visit MIX.com? Okay, so that was a site that I designed with a couple other folks on my team. And it was a very fast project, and I learned a lot on that. So I'm going to draw a lot of analogies to that project. I'm going to show you examples of what I did. And one of the first things I did on that project was I went and met everybody. It was something really as simple as just going to lunch with people, right? Because you have to quickly identify who's going to, be your stakeholder for these projects. And for me, it was, I had to reach out, and there was a lot of conflict around, well, I wouldn't say conflict, but people were scared about redoing visitmix.com because there was this whole thing about, well, that's the conference website. And we were like, no, it's the community website, the conference website at visitmix.com/2009. So there was a lot of me going out and saying, hey, this is me, let me take you to lunch, let's hang out. It's as simple as that, just be human, right? Go out and do something social. I must have probably spent a good week just during my other work, just meeting people and letting them get familiar with me, telling them, hey, you can email me anytime you want while I'm doing this, and just getting their trust. The other piece of communication, and what the texts tell you, is there's a deliverable, a solid deliverable at the end of every phase, which is true. But I disagree with the kind of deliverables we ask of our profession, right? We have these very static, like we want wireframes, and the wireframes are going to do this. Even if that doesn't make sense, it's going to do this. Right? We're going to lock down the layout. We're going to know what's above the fold. And that's not how it works, right? This is part art, part science. And when you have anything that's part art, part science, it defeats the purpose, like Bill was saying, to try and make it all science. I mean, it takes the magic out of it. So the way I like to communicate is I don't tell people, I don't give them deliverables and show them stuff through the process the way everyone else likes to. Instead, I tell them what I'm doing. And it creates a little bit of tension because everyone wants to see pictures, right? But if you go do number one and you have the trust, you still have to deliver on it. Then people are just waiting, and they go, okay. So I would walk by, and I would be like, hey, Jeff, oh, yeah, I tried a few concepts out, and it's coming well. Oh, can I see it? No, you can't see it. Because that's where it gets into some really nasty stuff, and people start focusing on the colors. And when you're actually designing something, you're not even set, right? In your mind, like, well, I'm not done with this yet. I'm experimenting, right? But the moment someone sees a picture, it's over, right? Because they are focused on the 4 things they like or they don't like. And the last thing is good people. So it took me years to learn this. My tendency, and I know a lot of our tendencies because we're type A people and we work hard and we're really passionate about stuff, is to try and fix the situation, right? So when you have a team where they're bad people, what you try to do, it's kind of like the refresh when the browser's crashing, right? You still hit refresh, but the internet connection's out, right? Ethernet's disconnected. The biggest lesson I've learned is you need to, and this is something you do, you need to gauge what kind of people you're working with. What are your stakeholders like? What is their personality? And there are times you need to let go because you can't fix the problem, right? So even if you want to do something really amazing, and this is why so many corporations, so many companies go out and they have a great idea. The execution could be spoiled by one bad apple. And this is where the term politics comes from, right? So you got to play the game, but at the same time, you need to know when to step back and say, this is probably not going to work. The currents are way against me right now. So with that, let's get started, right? And the first phase everyone talks about is vision. You need to have a vision. With the site that I worked on, this was the old site. It was called, it's just visitmix.com, and the whole point of the site was it was supposed to be the community site. This is where the year-long conversation goes on after Mix. Left a lot to be desired. We stole some template from somewhere, from one of our past sites, and we slapped it on, and it was kind of a blog, right? That's all it is. There's the stream of posts. What was interesting is a guy on my team, Joshua Allen, was the only author at that point on this blog. He's been around forever. I always joke about it because whenever I say something, I'm like, oh yeah, and I read the Gita, and he's like, oh yeah, I used to be into Kabbalah and stuff. So he's a really funny guy, writes amazing content. And when we look at the site, no one wants to even look at the content, right? Because you're just like, I don't want to look at it. But that wasn't the only thing. There were a lot of things we wanted to do. So there were really 3 of us on the team who thought about what Visit Mix could be. And we started going to lunch. And we started talking about it. We got signed off on the project, right, from management and stuff, and they said, okay, go do it. And really, no one thought that we would actually go relaunch the website. So it was 3 of us on the team. We would go to lunch. We'd talk about, hey, what do we want to do? And we really distilled it down to 3 things. One was bit. My team actually writes code. We design stuff. What we try to do is provide great examples of how to use our technologies alongside other technologies to light up a scenario, right? So one of the projects we recently launched was called Descry. It's a project about data visualization. So we basically created 3 or 4 data visualizations, put them out there on CodePlex. We open source all our stuff. We didn't have a place to put that stuff. And we're like, well, this is the Mix community. These are people who are here to learn about how our technologies play well on the web. Logical place to put it. So we said, okay, bits is number 1. We want to put bits up there. Number 2, a lot of us on the team, I mentioned a list apart, are addicted to content on the web that has a great shelf life. There's not much of that. There's a lot of noise on the web today. We didn't want to add to that noise. And sort of what we had in the past was this news stream. And I don't know how many of you work at a web organization, but the focus quickly becomes to measure things that are measurable. I think there's a technical term for that called McNamara's fallacy. But it doesn't mean you're succeeding. And we were measuring how many hits we got and stuff. And I would argue that someone getting on Twitter saying, hey, check out what Microsoft did, isn't it cool, would be so much better than us getting 200,000 hits on something, right? Because we changed perception at that point. So we said, look, we have the ability to create great content. Do we want to make the commitment to do it? It was sort of a no-brainer when we all talked about this at lunch. And we said, okay. So what we're going to do is every time we have a release, which we call our prototypes, every time we put a project up there, we're going to have 2 articles next to them. One going to be written by an industry influential, someone who really gets it. So with data visualization, we went to John Odell, who sits on our team, coincidentally. But in the past, we had Molly Hallschlag write an article and John Alsop from the microformats community. And they were all paired up with the project. So we said we'd have 2 articles with every release. And the last thing that we wanted was not really what was going to be on the site, but it was the requirement the site needed to meet. We wanted it to be a great user experience, right? We want it to be good inside and out. So by that I mean great markup, right? We need to practice what we preach. And our site was about building a great web. So this is what this is just a screenshot of the About page when we launched the site. And this was our vision, right? When do you think we wrote this? 2 days before we launched the site, right? I sent Thomas an email. I was like, hey, we might want to get our vision down on paper. And really, that's my point, that you're working on the web. And you've heard that you have to have this grandiose vision document, and a lot of people that review it and stuff. If you work on getting the trust and the communication and stuff, you don't need to do that. And you don't spend all this time that could be wasted, and you could put it up in front of stakeholders who don't really get it, right? So it's better to invest in the communication and the trust part if you have good people on the team. See, now you see how they all interrelate. Because if the vision's out here, that's all you need. I'm not saying don't write it down. I'm just saying take it with a grain of salt, right? That doesn't mean you'll have a successful project. How many of you have seen vision documents that just went to utter failure when it was turned into a project? So the second phase I want to talk about is paper, sketching. Sketching is this big topic that we always talk about as web designers, as software designers. When I was younger, when I was in school, I hated this part because in my projects, people would have me, all our professors would have us, sketch out our comps and our storyboards and stuff. And the thing is, I was averse to this because I saw people who sketched like this, and I couldn't. It was too beautiful, right? And I would aspire to doing something like this, but you're just never going to get there. It's not realistic. So I said, okay, this is stupid. Never going to do it. I knew at the back of my mind, it was kind of like your mom saying, you know what, you might want to drink a glass of milk every day because it's good for your bones. And you know at the back of your mind, yeah, she's right, but God, it tastes awful. I stopped sketching. But actually, let me get to another point. What was interesting was I'm also addicted to paper, right? I'm the guy who walks by the stationery section in Target and stops, even if I don't need something, right? And I'll flip through the little journals and stuff, and I like the smell of paper. I know that's weird. And every time I get a new journal or a book or whatever, you know how you write your name on the front page in really neat handwriting, and then you go, this is going to be the journal that is going to hold all my ideas forever, right? Every thought that I ever have, and it's going to be neatly formatted, and it's going to be a mind map, and it's going to be beautiful. So it applies to me. I always get that way when I get a new book. And I went to this conference called UX Week, thrown by Adaptive Path, and they had the best conference handout ever. It was the Moleskine notebook, right? And I always wanted one, but too cheap to go out and spend $18 on it. Flip it open, and I was in love, right? These things are beautiful. I don't know why. It's a simple notebook. It's leather-bound, had graph paper. Nothing really differentiates it. But it's just a Moleskine notebook. And it's just one of those things that I was like, oh, this is the perfect notebook. So I wrote my name on the front page. And if you find this book, return it to Nishant, and you'll get a hug. I actually did write that in my book. I actually have it here. The first 2 pages are just gorgeous, right? I spent a lot of time on them in meetings. And by page 3, chicken scratch. Can't read my own handwriting. It looks like crap. But for the first time in my life, that didn't deter me, right? For some reason, when MIX09 happened, it was about the time I was reading Buxton's book, which I highly recommend you go read. He talks about if it's taking you too long, you're not doing it right, and he's talking about sketching. So the approach I took with MIX09, and this is actually a page from, you can even see the date and stuff, I just spat out my thoughts. Every time I had a thought, I just wrote it. I didn't worry about structure. I didn't worry about formatting. I didn't worry about coming up with any nomenclature. There are wireframes in there. I just got my thoughts out. It's kind of weird. That was the first time I truly did it well. And I think I did well because of how it evolved the project in a span of a few weeks. Anyway, that restored my faith in sketching, and I think it taught me something about sketching. The pen is definitely mightier than the cursor, right? But it's really in the way you use it. And the key there is you don't want to get caught up in the activity of sketching. That is just a phase to get somewhere. So maybe you'll do it too. So the third section is function. And this is probably my favorite one because I break all the rules in this part of the design process. Now, I Googled this. Live searched it. A wireframe is a visualization tool for presenting proposed function, structure, and content of a website. That's the definition I found for a wireframe. Now think about that. Functions, structure, and content of a website. Isn't it funny that structure is in there? Because that really means layout. And if you think about it, the web is unlike any other medium where with a magazine, you can just flip it open and it's all in front of you. You see everything right there, right? Your eye can pick out because you've seen the closed set of what's available to you. On the web, totally different, right? There's a fold, and I'm not going to get into above the fold, below the fold arguments, but it's a very different place to be designing. And layout becomes of utmost importance on the web. And it's kind of funny that we try to hammer that out in 5 days in the early part of the project and say, okay, this is all locked. I don't buy that. So I'm all about tricking people, right? So this is a wireframe of mine that I use for MIX09. Looks exactly like every other wireframe, right? This is all about tricking execs. Same colors, they've seen these in other design sessions. The difference is how you pitch it, and I call these functional or feature wireframes. I basically get in there and I put the wireframes out and I let people look at them, and then they go, the first time someone says, oh, you might want to move tags to the, no, don't talk about moving the tags block. That will be done in the design process. Do you want tags on the page? Let's talk about that, right? And you have to slap their knuckles a few times. It's tough for people to get used to that. But what you do at that point is you bought yourself time to do layout when you really could be doing it much better, which is during the comping phase. That's when you really want to, it's so tied to the aesthetic. So, it was kind of funny because about 5 minutes into it, if you do the if you do the cracking the knuckles right, the people in the room start doing that to the people who haven't got the information, right? So at some point, about 5 minutes into the meeting, someone goes, yeah, but what about moving the logo? No, don't talk about that, dude. Like, he just talked about it. Just don't talk about that. Why don't we, he'll figure that out later. And it's great, right? Then they do the work for you. So what the beauty of this is, I'm still using, I think this is Nick Fink's template or whatever. Oh, the thing before I forget, I wrote an article about this on MIX09. It's called Web Design from the Gut. So you don't have to take notes or anything. This is in a very, very verbose form, and all these images and everything is up there if you want to reference it. So I created these wireframes, and what it did was it got me sign off on what we think the project, what the website should have in it. People didn't focus on where it should be placed. So the lesson to me, and this is something that I believe we will discover over time as this profession gets more solidified, is that content is king, but really on the web, I really think layout is king. It's where you place stuff. So on to the next lesson. We're actually zipping through this. Do you guys have any questions? No? Okay. I don't either. What a coincidence. Inspiration. So you heard the quote, right? Good designers borrow, best designers steal. There's a lot of truth to that. And every project that I take on, whether it's web design or interface design or software design, any sort of design, I feel very uncomfortable until I know what others are doing at that point in time, right? Because what you don't want to end up doing is launch a website and then people go, yeah, this is not even trendy today, or it's, I don't like the colors or whatever, right? And that doesn't mean you don't want to take risks and do new things, but that also means you need to balance that as a balancing act. And the way I do that is I go looking for inspiration. Now, I found through one of the CSS galleries, this girl's website, Tanya Marone or Maroni, I'm not sure if I'm murdering her name, but I think she shouldn't care because I've been promoting her like crazy. I've delivered this session a couple times, and I bet people are hitting her site. So if you scroll all the way down, this was one of the better examples I've seen of a site that just scrolls. And she debunks the myth that scrolling is bad, vertical scrolling. But if you go all the way down, there's a section called CSS Showcases. And she's basically gone ahead and bookmarked all these different galleries, right, that she uses during her research phase. So for probably 2 or 3 years, I've been going to this website, and I use it as my personal delicious that launches me off into these CSS galleries. So I go and immerse myself when I'm building a website, and I just click through hundreds of sites, right? I just go through them. It helps you understand what the new design patterns are. To me, that process is about assimilating, and people who have a tendency to design or come from an art background and stuff, I think it comes intuitively to a lot of us, right? And some of us who actually straddle the fence, we do both sides, we code and we design. It just adds a lot more structure to our thought process in the creative phase. So it's a very valuable thing, and I did that a lot for MIX09. And the lesson for me is that you have to go after inspiration, right? Or you might end up just missing the mark, just completely missing the mark. What I often hear from folks is, why do I need to look at other stuff? That's not creative, right? I'm going to go build my own unique thing, because that's our tendency sometimes. Our designer side wants to just invent. But remember, you're building a website. This is not art, right? This is a technical profession. So you can't afford to do that because you're going to alienate users, right? You just don't want to use some fancy like metaphor for developers who just won't get it, right? So it helps you care about your audience too. This is another one that gets me a little riled up. How many developers in here? Quite a few, and you guys stuck around. I feel loved. What was that? Yeah, that's exactly. So I am too, even though it doesn't seem like it. I actually have a degree in computer science. My first job was at Amazon, and I worked as a developer on Amazon Unbox, which was a really bad product. And then I worked a little bit on Kindle, which you guys may have seen, the Kindle Reader. And I did a little bit of development there. And what was interesting about Amazon is they gave their developers a lot of time to prototype. And I know a lot of environments do this, right? Where it's encouraged, write code, we're going to throw this away, right? We're going to spend 4 weeks just writing code, we're going to throw it away, we're going to test all our ideas. At least a good development environment does that, especially when you're going after something new. Prototyping is okay. How many times have you heard someone say, yeah, just go off and comp stuff for 2 weeks, don't worry if it doesn't ship? I haven't, because every time I say, okay, I'm going to go play around. What? No. Comps are due in 4 days. Wait, so you want me to get creative in 4 days somehow? Mm-hmm. It's like saying, pee now. Right? No. Bladder's empty. Fortunately, I was on a good team. And I said, I'm going to just go off and do some blue sky comp development, right? And I am extremely brave for doing this because I'm putting up really failed comps, right, where I was just trying things out. And these are not even complete, right? It's all these missing sections in it. Probably spent a week doing it. Here are just 2 comps. I think I came up with 5 concepts. So when Buxton said you had to do 5 things, I was like super happy. I was like, yeah. And it was perfect. I didn't use any of these comps, but when you see the final design, there's so many things that carried over, and you'll see that, right? Just, yeah, paint a picture in your mind of what you're seeing here, and we'll get to the final design. I think this is supremely important in any software design process. You have to try, iterate. Never be happy with the first thing you come out with. And a big part of why we don't do that is because of what environments we work in, because they don't appreciate it. And a part of that is actually taking that back to the environment and explaining to people what the value of that is. And again, it goes back to trust and good people and communication. So I searched for a lot of inspiration for MIX09, but there was no aha moment. And this was another term that I introduced in the design process where I'm working, where they're just like, what are you talking about? And I don't know how many of you are like this, but I feel very uneasy till I feel it when I get the right answer, right? Now, that's after a lot of research, that's after a lot of prototyping, that's after thinking about layout and a lot of other things. But even though there's all this research you're doing, it's an arrangement game at some point, right? Where you feel like, okay, I think this is the right thing. And it may not be, but you have that aha moment, and that's the moment you want to move forward and you want to do more stuff. I rely on this. I don't move on before it. And this is probably the #1 issue in my marriage. Because my wife sees me stressing out about stuff when I'm sitting at home. And she's like, why are you working? And she's like, are things bad at work? I'm like, no. I'm just building this thing. And then when we get to it, it's like I haven't had my aha moment at that point. So I'm taking it home and I'm stressing about it. And I really try to invoke that aha moment. So for me, the aha moment came when I saw this piece by James White on Viral Peter's blog. I don't know if you read her blog. She's a great web designer. And I don't know why, but at that point, I had wireframes. I had the kind of functionality what we wanted. We had a pretty good vision that we all sort of signed off on. But it just wasn't coming together. And when I saw this piece, and I remember conversations with the team saying, we just need to do something really bold for this first version. We always knew that we were going to do visit mix.com, throw it out there, and watch for a year, and see how people respond, how they feel, collect feedback. We didn't want it to be perfect. This is exactly what Bill said yesterday, is that we're often scared to put things out there till it's perfect. I'll be the first one to say 6.5 on this site out of 10, right? I don't think it's the best site I've created that we worked on. But you need to have that aha moment that connects all those things together. And for me, it was when I saw this, and I showed it to a few people on the team, and I was like, don't you like the emotion you feel when you see this? And a few of us on the team agreed about it, and that's how we actually fell on this whole Commodore branding thing, right? That's how we sort of landed on it. And it's working in a lot of our branding. I think it's something that's going to stick around for a while. So the question you'll probably ask is, what if I don't have the aha moment? Well, the answer is move on. That's what happens sometimes. But that doesn't mean that you evade it or you're ashamed about it. I think you should communicate it out and say, hey, I'm waiting for it to come together. The next phase I call compose, and this is when you do comping, right? And after I had the aha moment, this is really the time where you double down and you focus on all the dirty details of designing the website. So I spent probably a week after I had the aha moment, and I built all these comps, right? I built about 8 or 9 comps. And even if you notice in our articles page, there are decisions I made, and this is a point where you want to stop being indecisive. You make a call, and you have to stick to it, right? One of the bad decisions that I made here was the dark on the light on dark, the text contrast, right? These are articles, so it was almost an amateur mistake, but it looked good at that time, and the amount of testing we did, we felt like it was good. So this is something I feel okay sharing, and I'll change it out at some point. But we made all these comps, and what we focused on was pixel perfection, right? Because at this point, when you show this to people, you're also setting yourself up for success, because now people can get nitty-gritty about it, right? Now you put it out there, and that's the most painful session. I basically printed these out in large format, put them on the wall, let people walk through the room for a day, right? And then I got all sorts of emails. It was good. It was a lot of good feedback, but you have to sift through the bad stuff too. Like there's the comments of, I don't like that color. Like, I know, but you're not in our audience. So I did a few comps, which is what I put up here. But the key lesson for me in the comping phase, and I've seen loads and loads of web designers not do this, is you don't focus on the details, right? They think that this is sort of another amorphous phase. But this is where the way I approach it is the comps that I build need to be screenshots as if the site was created already, right? That's the thing I aspire to, and that's the thing I've seen work in past projects that I've worked on. All right, I said I wouldn't talk much about coding, but I do want to share something about coding, because this is really, to me, the meat and potatoes of your website, right? And it's kind of funny that we think of this as a creative process, but I think Bill is totally right when he talked about it in his keynote yesterday. It's about throwing away all these ideas and then finally executing really well on one, right? And on the web or any software, execution is about writing code. On the web specifically, it's about writing good markup, good standards-based HTML, CSS markup. If you come up to me and ask me what the value of standards is after this, I will punch my face, right? Because people often come up to me and go, why? Well, I don't get this whole standards thing. And I'm just like, sorry, right? You shouldn't have stayed around the session. So we will not talk about that. That's the only question I forbid you to ask me. But what we did was something really stupid. We didn't have budget, and we don't have enough people on the team. So what do you think of doing? Outsourcing, right? So we're like, and this is the iffy part, because I'm a front-end web developer, right? I care about writing good markup. And I was the one who actually came up with the idea of outsourcing, so I take the fall for this. You know those PSD slicing companies that you see? Yeah, you send us a comp, and we'll slice it up and send it back to you in 8 hours. Seemed like a good idea. What do you think all the red stuff has in common? All the stuff that you see up there, the red stuff. Come on. Nobody? What was that? Close. I was more going for this. So you guys got it. That's a steaming pile of crap. Which is funny, because when I showed my wife this slide, she was like, and I was like, can you identify what it is? She was like, yeah, it's a beaver coming out of the water. Go back to sleep, honey. Do you see that? Because I don't. Do you? Because I see a few nods. I just didn't see it. I wonder if that's actually a real picture. Actually, no. I see I have a little time. I can tell a story. We got a puppy 6 months ago, a little Weimaraner puppy, because I've been obsessed with that breed. And when I was young, I had a puppy, and my mom raised it. I didn't. So I had no idea that it's like giving birth to a child, right? This thing needs you day in and day out. I used to go home every day at lunch to let the damn thing out. I love it, okay? No, I do. I truly do. But you know how it is. It's frustrating. And we used to wake up 3 times a night, 4 times a night sometimes, to take Yoshi out. That's what we named it, because we're big Mario Kart fans. And it's horrible in Seattle because it's not raining, it's not cold, but it's not warm, and it's not dry, right? So picture me, well, don't actually picture this, but 2 a.m., like, my wife nudges me, and I had to get up because if she loses her sleep, oh my God. So it was a sacrifice I was willing to make, and I would take Yoshi. You had about 15 seconds to get him from the crate and run out to the yard, right? Because the way it works, I heard, was whatever your age, the age of the dog is in months, you multiply that by 10, and you get the number of seconds you have. So if your dog is 1 month old, you multiply it by 10. That's how many seconds you have between when he knows he wants to pee and when he pees, right? So this is awful that I'm actually telling this story, but I'm so deep into this that we got to finish it. Because it all comes back to a steaming pile of crap, which is, I think, the keynote here. So I would run out with Yoshi, and then you'd stand there, and it's, a little drizzle, and you're just like, come on, you can do it. And because he had to do the big job of the night, right? And he would, and there was this aha moment for me the first time that it happened, because I had a plastic bag, the doggy bags that you use to pick up the poop. And he pooped, and I was like, good boy, and I would give him a treat, right, because we were doing treat training, we were taking this class. And I reached down, and for the first time, I picked up, and I was like, whoa, there's steam coming out of this. And it was the first time it was like, whoa, okay, that's where steaming pile of crap comes from. And I'm saying crap, but you know the word I really mean.
Hey, Nishant, can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
Is that hash? Did they really make an ID of an element 332?
Thank you. Okay, so So I'm getting to the punchline here. We will give you great standards-based, i.e. it validates, semantic markup is what was on the contract, $1,800. 4 days turnaround. They did give us code that validates. Oh yeah, they did. But when you got into it, if you've done any semantic markup, take the second style there, orange layout, which is really articles. So God forbid I ever change the color. I am so screwed. But orange layout, let me get to it. A div inside that has com_so_far, the comment so far, attack the line item within an unordered list called your comment, I think. And within your comment, there's a closure around, and a class applied to it on a div called name. So I think this was attacking someone's name within a comment, right? Which was a paragraph tag ultimately. But the worst part is, they weren't even consistent in that, because if you look at the slices that they create in the image, its background, it's easy. I don't even know what that means. As opposed to not easy, it took a lot of time for me to pick up this graphic. Background is easy yellow for the orange layout. So, clearly when I saw this, I just flip out, right? And we get on a call with these folks, and really the punchline is, it was just a bad idea. We tried to cut corners, and we got what we asked for. So we got this code back, and then we decided that we're going to rewrite the thing, and we couldn't do a proper rewrite of it. So now what I have is a slightly unmaintainable code base. Fortunately, we're already on the path to doing complete redesign in the next 6 or 7 months. But that was a good lesson learned for us. We tried to cut corners, and we kind of got screwed. So when I come back to standards, and I talked about I was just joking, you can come and ask me why standards are important. If for no other reason, try to maintain a site that doesn't use good practices. It's just a nightmare when you have inline styles and table-based layout where you have to rewrite everything. So you're stripping content out of this darn thing and basically putting a new body around it, right? New bones. So I would say this is the part where we all screw up, and we did. It's something to learn from, right? You want to spend time writing good code. So this was the site when we launched it, and you guys saw the comms, and you can actually go to visit MIX09. I just wanted to show it to you. We sort of closed the loop, and it was sort of pretty close to pixel perfect from what the comps were. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, right? We wanted to throw something up there quickly. We did it on time. We were on schedule. And there are things that we've learned. We put crazy egg on it. We've got analytics on this. So we're watching. And for the most part, it's doing what it was meant to do, right? People find our code because our projects are receiving downloads in the hundreds of thousands. So clearly it's getting the visibility. People like our articles. I see folks here who I tweet with, who I'd never known. Exactly, Woogie Chuck. How do you say our last name?
My actual last name, Muir.
Muir. Okay, so I said it wrong for exact one whole year. Nice to meet you. So we have a community that's building around it, and we're ecstatic, right? For a really small team, we did this. We get an insane number of views on our stuff. We've been linked to by a lot of reputed people. It's changed perception. So that was our goal that we wanted to achieve. We basically now have buy-in from, now we'll have a budget to do this, right? And that's the key. Yes, and one of the decisions we made, sorry, close your eyes, it gets dizzy, was to separate all our projects out, right? So we said instead of having this style guide just for every prototype we do, let's attack it by prototype. So if we're doing microformats, it's a different audience that looks at that stuff, so we could cater it to that audience, right? This was one of our releases that we did that was Oxide, and it was about blogging, and it was a little whimsical, so we're able to get away with it. But it still fits well within, the IA of the site, which is what's important. So if I can offer you 2 free lessons in conclusion, I actually was being able to retentive, I wanted to get to 10. And I just had 8 lessons, if you guys notice, but it works out. Lesson number 9 is this quote that Jeffrey Zellman had at his keynote at Web Design World, where I actually presented this for the first time last year. And he tells a story. I think a lot of us in here are probably musicians, right? I'm not even going to ask for a show of hands, but we probably learned some musical instrument. We had some aspiration of being a musician at some point. So did Zellman, and he went the next step, and he wrote a bunch of songs, and he hired a studio, and he went out and recorded a few sessions. He did a few sessions, recorded a few numbers. And at some point, they assigned him a sound editor, just a sound engineer who was assigned to the studio, and he was helping Jeffrey mix this stuff. And I could be wrong about this, but I'm paraphrasing the story he told. And he asked him, what do you think about this stuff, right? And the sound editor was like, you've got a great technique, and you're definitely a great composer and stuff, but how about the song, right? And to me, it was such a great line, because in that one line, he asked Jeffrey, it's not connecting with me, right? And this comes back to what Bill was saying yesterday in his keynote, and we heard Deborah say, even today in her keynote, which I think are such strong messages, that ultimately this is not for us. If you want to build art for yourself, do that, but this is a website that you're building for someone else, right? Everyone but you is going to use this. So never forget the essence of what you're trying to do, right? And it doesn't matter, if you make some bad design decisions. That is a part of the design process, right? You learn from them, and you update them. The last lesson is by another smart man. I think this line is so great. I'm not a businessman. I'm a business man, which is such a cool play on words, right? Because Jay-Z, back in the day, I think a lot of people made bets against him and said, you're not going to do anything, and then he became Jay-Z. And by the way, I get all my cool hip-hop culture from my wife. I actually listen to Steely Dan. So this is not in me trying to play cool. I just heard this quote on one of his tracks, and it was great. And what I took away from it is there was a little bit of cockiness about it. There's a little bit of vanity. And I don't think that's what you take away from it. Just when you're in the position of being a designer, a web designer who's in charge of the creative, you cannot afford to not own it, right? And that doesn't mean going around telling people, I own this damn thing, because that just turns people off. But you need to make really good decisions across the board for the business, for the engineering, right? You need to know about all those things. You can't, I don't think you can succeed being a good web designer if you don't code. That's my personal belief. I just don't think so. I think I would recommend try to look at print, right? That's probably a better place. So you are the business, right? And you're not just the guy pushing the pixels, which is what a businessman would be. You're the guy in the middle of all of this. So a couple of housekeeping items. Don't leave yet, because I have posters that you guys are welcome to if you actually like the poster that I gave away. The print rendering, I think, is, at least we think it's beautiful. I wrote this up all in an article that's on the site, so you can go to it. There are a couple other sessions presented by my team, because we work on these prototypes. One is about Descry, which is a project we did around information visualization that was a lot of fun, that we used standards-based markup and HTML and CSS. And Silverlight side by side in very unique ways. And another one on microformats by a guy called Tim Adlin on my team. So yeah, Joshua, who I talked about, is going to present the Descry session. A really smart guy. So is Tim. So feel free to check it out tomorrow. They're small sessions. People like this font for some reason. I've heard it enough now that I thought I'll put it up there. It's free. I will not try to pronounce his name, but you can go search for Museo, and you can find the font. So with that, I am willing to take questions. Yeah.
What was the name of the gal's, the CSS site, scrolling site?
Tanya Marone, M-E-R-O-N-E.
Get a URL for that?
No, I just Google it. Come on. M-E-R-O-N-E. But go to visitmix.com, and it's all on the article. So in case you forget any of this and you haven't written it down, it's all in the article. So yeah. Questions?
What's your Twitter at?
Rainy Pixels.
Rainy Pixels?
Rainy, R-A-I-N-Y, Pixels. Yeah, but let me zoom on this. Seriously? All right, you can grab a poster and leave. We have like 3 minutes and then 15 minutes. How was the Tau party yesterday, by the way? I totally missed it. Yeah. Thank you for not rubbing it in.
6.5 out of 10.
What was that?
6.5 out of 10.
6.5? I heard it was a great open bar, though. It was one of the better open bars.
Good booze.
Yeah. Well, that should give it a 7 at least. Isn't that what the party's about? Good booze?
Yesterday, at the middle of the party, maybe an 8.
Good. If you guys are shy, I'll be up here. I'm going to actually stop being awkward. I'll be up here, and you can come and ask me a question in person. Thank you very much for...
Where are the posters if people want to come up?
Here, right here.